and you're live.
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. I'm Alex Ricky Gonzalez. Wherever you are in the world, welcome to the first live engagement broadcast discussing restorative justice. This 6-episode series will be a discussion with members of the Longmont Community Justice Partnership, or LCJP, which has successfully implemented restorative justice practices in the city of Longmont, Colorado. Over 20 years, they have transformed their community through hard work and cooperation. This is an engagement broadcast, which means we want all of you to join the conversation. Leave your comments and questions before, during, and after each live episode to keep that conversation going. Make sure to use hashtag restorejustice so we can find your comments. Each episode will consist of 30 minutes of guided questions from me, followed by 30 minutes of audience engagement. So please ask your questions and share your thoughts as they come to you. Kristen Drysdale of Lend One Hand is here to make sure they get shared. In today's discussion, we'll meet Candee Campbell, find out what the LCJP is, and the current state of restorative justice in Longmont, Colorado. Longmont is the home to more than 90,000 people, sits about a half-hour northeast of Boulder and almost an hour north of Denver. While incarcerations and recidivism rates across the U.S. are at an all-time high, with over 1.5 million inmates and an average recidivism rate of 65%, the story in Longmont, Colorado is drastically different. In 2010, 165 offenders participated in the restorative justice program. Less than 10% reoffended after 1 year, and 97% of all participants in the program at that time, victims and offenders included, were satisfied with the program's process. To house those 165 offenders in prison for 1 year would cost almost $4.5 million, which is over 10 times the 2010 budget of LCJP. These recidivism and satisfaction rates have remained consistent in Longmont since 2001. My guest for this episode is Candee Campbell, Executive Director of Longmont Community Justice and Boulder County Restorative Justice. Candee has an impressive background in finance, media, and nonprofit work. She's been a publisher and editor of Design Publications and Virgo Publishing, CEO of Colorado Company Magazine, and the marketing manager at Penton Media. Today, she's the Executive Director of LCJP, commands the implementation of restorative justice in Boulder County, and is a board member of the Women's Business Development Center, which she also founded. Candee, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk to us about LCJP.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
We really do appreciate your time. I know you're a very, very busy woman. So I just gave this really broad overview. What I'd like to start with is a lot of people have been asking, what is restorative justice? So let's start there. What is it?
That's a big question, and I think it's been on top of mind and topic for the country for the last several years as we pave the way for a new way to respond to crime and conflict in communities. Longmont's very fortunate to have had trailblazers. 20 years ago, Beverly Title and Mike Butler had a vision for our community that was phenomenal. It was a response to that same crime and conflict that brought victims and offenders together with an opportunity to have dialogue. Restorative justice views violence, community decline, and fear-based responses as indicators of broken relationships. It offers a different response, namely the use of restorative solutions to repair harm and conflict, crime, victimization. So a big question to answer, but it's a very human approach to how we respond to offenders.
So is that what makes it so important to a community, the schools, and society in general? Is it that it's that human response?
Absolutely. For our program to be successful, it enlists all community members to participate. In our program, we have a schools program where we enlist the school district, and namely individual schools from middle schools to high schools. The school resource officers, which brings in our police department, our community program within the police department. We also, our volunteer base is significantly valuable to us because it brings in the community members to speak to harms that the community is impacted by.
So you mentioned your program. let's transition here to talking about LCJP specifically, because from what I understand, restorative justice is it's a really broad concept, and different places kind of take their own way of practicing it, of making it happen. So how exactly does LCJP work? Because we have a lot of people saying, well, yeah, it's a good idea, but I don't understand how you got it to work.
Sure. You know, I don't think there's a secret formula that goes hand in hand with making a program successful. I will say for us, it's the stakeholders, our key stakeholders, the buy-in from the community and our community programs are what make it successful. It's taken 20 years. I think we're entering into our 21st year, and that's like planting seeds 21 years ago for a really great idea, but having to get that traction comes from direction and leadership. In this case, leadership came from the police department, and Chief Mike Butler was that implementer. For us, as we continue to get into the school districts and offer solutions, that requires buy-in from the key stakeholders within that district. So it is that personal, it's a personal approach, but it's also commitment to all of our partners that keep our program surviving. For us, we're a nonprofit, so we have the luxury of being independent of any government program, so we're not defined specifically by one targeted grant or one pilot program. We have the luxury of being able to tap into other foundations and other supporters, and that also generates more buy-in and more interest in what we do.
But you do work with the government, correct?
We received several justice assistance grants through the Edward Byrne Family Foundation, and because of that, we were able to pilot our schools program, and we were able to pilot our program within the DA's office. So it is very instrumental for us to utilize resources, and in this case, the justice assistance grants, because of legislation, are trailblazing the way for other programs within the country to tap into resources and launch and develop their own restorative practices programs.
And how has that been going for Colorado? What exactly, let's back up a little bit, because you spoke about legislation, because we also got a couple of comments about this legislation too. What exactly does that legislation mean for Colorado?
Sure. Several years ago, our House Bill 111032, that was authored by Senator Pete Lee, was passed. For Colorado, that was instrumental because it defined restorative practices and restorative justice as a first response, or a preferred first response in courts and in schools. As we continue to develop what that means, it's a little scary for a lot of communities because no one wants to be told what to do, and certainly not have restorative justice be defined as something that is required. To step back, restorative justice and restorative practices are optional. It is victim and offender have to come together and agree to the process, or it doesn't work. So for Senate bills and House bills to be passed for any state, including Colorado, a lot of questions come up. And to us, that's fantastic, because that means there's dialogue and conversation about what opportunities and responses we have available to us. We had House Bill 13-1254 was passed, and that gave funding and resources for 4 pilot sites within Colorado to launch a restorative justice program. Boulder County, Alamosa, Weld County were included in those 4 pilots. Because we're Boulder County with our program, we were included in the Boulder County pilot service area. Again, that's very exciting. There's funding at the state level and government level for more exploratory research and finding out if this really does work, if there is data and statistics to support that restorative practices are a great response and an answer to what's been ailing our court systems.
And what is most interesting to me about what you're saying right now is, you keep talking about it as a learning opportunity. You keep talking about it as continuous growth. I think a lot of people may have come into this saying, okay, so they're done. They got it to work. Great. It's done. But it sounds like you are continually trying to find better and better ways to make this program a better program, a better option.
We've had some hard lessons this last year. Being a legacy organization doesn't mean we have all of the answers. We found out, I guess, the best possible way to find out when you experiment and you take risks. We wrote several grants in conjunction with our 20th Judicial District and raised almost $1.4 million over 4 years to bring restorative justice to Boulder County. In that process, within 8 months, the program and project was ceased. What we learned was we were trying to replicate our Longmont program and implant it right into a district attorney's office in Boulder County. And unfortunately, that doesn't work. You can't replicate a program that is so grassroots and so community driven like ours is and replicate it through paperwork or through funding. We learned, and we are very fortunate to, again, with the legacy organization, recognize and value our partnerships, which are at the human level. So from our schools to our volunteers, to our community partners, to our staff, that you can't replicate that. You have to grow that. So planting seeds in our county was really, bringing back those partnerships and redefining what it means to cultivate a restorative community, not build a restorative justice program.
Which, I mean, it's a total, for someone like me who has grown up in our justice system, it sounds like a shock to me, because it means that I have to change the way that I thought about the justice system. I was given the justice system that I have, and to look at something like restorative justice, it might be a little bit daunting to think I have to grow this. But what are the benefits of growing the program?
I think I would consider, if you go to school and you are elevated to your senior year in high school and you are 12 years old, the shock of everything you're supposed to know and everything you're supposed to implement, you don't have the perceived value. And by transplanting any of our program into another environment is shocking. Transporting restorative practices into a justice system is shocking, and it's two different culture blends. We operate by the 5 R's. Our Beverly Title, our founder, she has coined our 5 R's, and it is known nationally and internationally, and we live by that. And the primary of the 5 R's is relationship. So building any foundation for any organization, whether it's replicating our program into another community or a district attorney's office, begins with our foundational principles. The first one being relationship. You're building relationships and partnerships. The second is respect. So for us to work with our community, it's respecting our community and the values, and understanding demographics and understanding people. Because we're stepping into a community not to dictate or say how things should be done, but to value how that community operates. And Longmont's very unique. It's taken 20 years, and that community operates very differently because it started with relationships. You'll see Mike Butler walk in the streets and meeting with people and engaging. The third for us is responsibility. So of the 5 R's, the third is responsibility, and we have a significant responsibility to engage with our community and be good stewards of our program and our resources to assist and really be leaders for restorative justice the way that it's meant to be implemented. So again, replicating a program really starts with the people. It starts with your team and volunteers and the community.
And I love that.
Sorry about that.
No, it was fantastic, and I love that you hit on the idea of perceived value, because if you just go in and you just say, okay, this is the way it's done, they won't see as much value as if they build it themselves, unless they grow it themselves, which is what you have done in Longmont. So speaking about Longmont, I know I mentioned some of the statistics in the beginning, but what kind of results might one see with restorative justice?
I think the best answer for that is, again, this is a this is a very personal and very respectful process. And there are ideas of what a conference model looks like, or what a restorative justice circle looks like. And we get a lot of questions, and people are really wanting to see, show me a video, show me what that looks like. But until you experience that firsthand, a lot of people, including from our officers to other community partners, who are very disinterested in what restorative justice was all about, until you sit in a circle and you get to watch firsthand victims and offenders communicating and engaging in dialogue and getting to the root cause of who is hurt and what their needs are, you see that there's a very big difference between a court process and a restorative process. And much better results come out of when an offender can sit in front of and engage with a victim and feel remorse or a need to apologize, not even that it's required, but have it to offer up a response and commitment to repairing that harm. That's impactful. You can't describe that until you sit and feel that personally. Officers who come and sit in our circles, it's unique for them individually because they're the arresting officer, and they get to watch these kids that are growing up in our community take a different approach or a response to an infraction, to a crime that they committed, and it's a tremendous experience.
Definitely. It sounds very personal. I can rattle off statistics all day, right? And we did have a couple of new statistics which John may have shared with the audience, but statistics are one thing, but having that personal one-on-one connection, that relationship, and seeing someone who did something that they probably aren't proud of and then become a better person after that is probably a very unique, a very inspiring process. And I imagine that's part of how you gain your volunteers. They experience that process and then they want to become a part of it.
Yes, our schools program, we have students who participate. They might have received a citation from an officer, and they get to go through our restorative justice conference model within our schools and in that school culture, and many of them step up to be on our student team. They see themselves now as empathetic. They have gone through a process and now want to be leaders and participate with their peers in a meaningful way. And that's that grassroots culture building community that we all crave, and many communities that want to see restorative justice thrive. That's the very basic beginning foundation of that, is again at the human level.
Absolutely. I just thought of, I wonder what that does to the bullying rates, because I know bullying is a huge issue in schools these days. I wonder how that impacts the bullying that may or may not be going on in that school. But that was a total side note. So clearly, based on what you're saying, talking about being in the schools, having the students in the schools, you have the police officers, and then you have your office. Restorative justice isn't a standalone thing, right? It's bigger. It's bigger than that.
We, as an organization, and we get to participate every day with conferences for victims and offenders and represent what it should look like. We get to experience that as an organization every day as well. And I have to tell you, it's a difficult value proposition to even live restoratively. I come from a corporate background. If there's an issue and you have an issue, you go to human resources. And if you get to that point, you're pretty much knowing that you're going to walk out the door. Very few organizations can handle conflict within their team restoratively, and it's dialogue, it's conversation, it's respect, and it's a human approach to everyone makes mistakes and everyone has a different opinion. But I'm excited to see how even within our organization challenges come up, and our team is phenomenal at being able to respond to those challenges and do it in a new way. And we'd love to see that resonate throughout other corporate cultures, not just addressing issues within a court system or crime. The application is all across the board and available and valuable.
Which I didn't even think about. I thought about it as specifically as a justice system, as a community, but when you think about organizations, when you think about pretty much anything that involves a group of people, these practices would probably be really helpful, and knowing how to do these sorts of practices could probably alleviate a lot of conflict and a lot of issues. So I know that you personally travel a lot, right, for LCJP?
Yes.
How is your program, how is LCJP connected to the rest of the restorative justice that is going on in the world in that sense?
Well, exciting for us, we've had 2 staff members both receive a Fulbright award. So each traveling to New Zealand, which is a proponent for, and I'm sure most people, is if you Google search anything about restorative justice, New Zealand will undoubtedly come up first. For us to have staff members that it's attractive to them to be able to apply their skills and contribute something phenomenal to another community outside of our country, that information share and application just helps us and our country grow. So we love the sister partnerships between that. But to have 2 of our staff members selected is phenomenal for us. We have a really great team, the same team that also travels to other national conferences to deliver training and coaching and mentoring for other startup programs, as well as those that just that peer support between programs to share.
Do you learn anything from taking those trips to seeing other people, or do you feel like they learn more from you, or is it a give and take?
I think both. I don't think we realize we're a very humbled organization just because of how we operate. It's exciting to view other programs, and there is no right or wrong way. There's a lot of variables for the application and delivery, but it all comes back down to the same principles. And it's exciting to see how other organizations are applying, and we learn something new every time. And I love that we get to be leaders for restorative justice and representing what a solid, viable, thriving community program looks like. And yet we're still learning, we're still forging new paths and really exploring the ways that we can utilize restorative practices in many different avenues.
But the key to those restorative practices has always been community, right? That has been the biggest, at least for LCJP, community has been I don't want to call it an obstacle, but it has been the biggest necessity to get it moving forward, right?
Absolutely. And community can come in the form of a classroom, in the form of a house, your household or your home with friends and family. That's a community. And the application of restorative practices has been going on for thousands of years. So this isn't something that's new or trendy. It is the way that people lived in different cultures and in different tribes. And for us to look at it with legislation or new program launches, it kind of feels like a new thing, but it's not. But again, it originated with community and continues with community in order for it to survive.
So as you've been working to try to implement this into the Boulder County community, is that community buy-in the biggest obstacle that you're running into? What is the biggest obstacle that you're running into trying to implement this in the Boulder County in general?
When you get to see the value and the and just the results of that very personal meeting of victim and offender and community that come together and see the results of that, you really want to spread that everywhere, far and wide. And that's a very novel idea, because it's a great idea to have, but the obstacles that we have are really, it's hard to say this is what we do. It's easier to show. and it takes time to integrate people into that, into a conference, into a circle, into a community, into just understanding the value proposition of what restorative practices are. And I can say that firsthand. Any person coming into our program, new volunteers, or even myself as a staff member, it's a lot of new, even though it resonates as being very familiar. For us, for Boulder County, there's a lot of really great existing programs that have been in place for many years that implement restorative justice. And we don't compete, we all collaborate in hopes that we can garner knowledge and more resources and assist each other for spreading that. And I think for us, the biggest obstacle we have is getting into the community and engaging, delivering the information. This is what's available. This is the approach. So education, I think our biggest obstacle would be being able to articulate what we do and how it has value and that it's an option.
Which is why we're doing this series right now, hopefully to spread that education. So would you say that there is a specific environment in which restorative justice does best?
I would say when all stakeholders or all parties are invested, whether that's 5 people or 500 people or 5,000 people, it does best when everyone is together for the same reason. They're all coming to the table with one end goal, that you want to have dialogue and get to a better place of, I guess for us, living by the 5 R's, that when we can all come to the same place at the same time for the same reasons, then it works really well.
And I know Longmont, I swear this is my last question before we get to the audience engagement. I know Longmont has been doing this for over 20 years now. Did it take a while to get that stakeholder buy-in? Did it take a while to get the different stakeholders to see that goal and then to participate in it?
I think that would be a really great question for Chief Mike Butler. For the 21 years it has taken to grow this organization from the very beginning, his communication, his passion for this, and he's coming up in a segment next. He would be the most ideal person to answer that question.
All right. Kristen, do we have any comments that we would like to share from our audience?
Yeah, Wayne Metter saying, thank you so much, Candee, for restoring. Let me pull that up. There we go. Thank you so much, Candee, for restoring. Whether it's justice or anything else, restoration is the key. I thought that was a pretty nice comment.
That is. Let's sit on that for a little bit, because as Candee mentioned, this doesn't just have to be with justice, right, Candee? I mean, this really is more about relationships, and it's about restoring relationships. Which relationships would you say you have seen needed the most restoring when it came to restorative justice?
That's all across the spectrum. I can say every relationship at some point needs restoring or repair. We're not perfect human beings. We're going to make mistakes, whether it's that interpersonal relationship or in the cases for our program where crime has occurred or conflict. So all across the board.
All relationships. And I can say, as someone who studies communication, yeah. we all have miscommunications, and but it can be hard to step back and say, okay, what happened here? What went wrong? So I know we're not getting specifically into the circles, but I know that there is a person there that facilitates that conversation, right?
Yes. First I'll start with, it takes great courage for both victim and offender to come together, and that being primary. To have for us, our conferences run with victim and offender and their support team. a facilitator and a co-facilitator. The co-facilitator takes notes and makes sure that the information that's being relayed is sort of cataloged. Everything is confidential, so at the end of the conference, all of the materials are shredded. The facilitator and the co-facilitator create a safe space, an environment for a victim and offender to come together and be able to, I guess, engage in that dialogue in a respectful way. We also have community members that will sit in the conference to speak to how the community was impacted. If a crime has occurred, they can speak from a personal experience, or they can speak the community as a whole. And we're very fortunate to have in most of our conferences an officer participating. So if a crime has been committed and the offender comes to the table, the officer is also present. And that for us has been instrumental, because it means all parties now have come to the table to have a discussion. So that's the starting point. I think we have several members on our team that I think it would be a great segment to address what it really means to go through a conference from both perspectives, including the officer's perspective, what it means for them to sit and engage.
And it doesn't just end at the circle, right? They don't all just sit down and have this conversation and then they're like, all right, we're done. There's more to it afterwards, right?
Absolutely. I think the goal for coming together is not only being able to address the harms, but how to repair those harms. And the community members also participate in such a beautiful way that when all parties come together and can come to agreements with what that might look like, and of course both victim and offender have to be in agreement too. Contract items can be anything from an apology to restitution, community service, which goes far above and beyond what perhaps a court process might have allowed. For us, similar cases, if it had gone to court, there might be restitution and a fine, and that's it. In a conference model, that same end result might come out in a contract, but with so much more being applied.
Absolutely. All right, Kristen, we're ready for the next comment. I see a good one from Michael Thomas, actually.
Sorry. Okay. Let's see. He has a couple of good ones, so we'll see if we're looking at the same one. I've got this one. Establishing quality continuity begins with awareness, and developing quality roots with directions.
That is a fantastic comment. That's not the one I was looking at, but that's okay. That one's better than the one I was looking at. So to establish that continuity, what kind of, I mean, let's just go to the basics. What kind of work does that take, Candee?
I guess from my definition, restorative justice, it seeks to build partnerships, to reestablish mutual responsibility for constructive responses for wrongdoing within our communities. That's a strong definition. That's a big definition, and again, it comes right back down to individuals. So I think what we look at is a balanced approach. Victim and offender really do come together and both agree on what, who's been hurt and what are their needs, and being able to address that in a safe environment. Root causes. Dialogue continues, and at the end of a conference, every conference is unique. Every victim and offender, their circumstances are unique. So we really strive for that balance. We strive for ensuring that their voice is heard, particularly the victims. The victim's voice needs to be prevalent, because it's a new experience. If you go to court as a victim, unless you have a lawyer, you still don't get to speak. And same for offender. To be able to speak and speak your truth is powerful. Balance for us, balance for a conference, from my perspective, is really, if we've done our job, we've created a safe space and environment for that to be at the forefront.
And I just want to make sure that the audience sits with this idea that it is that personal, that each conference is unique, each person is treated uniquely, which arguably our current justice system in most states doesn't really accommodate. It doesn't accommodate that uniqueness. The other part of this that I want to point out that has been mentioned in a couple of the preview videos that we've done is that it's not just about the crime, right? You also focus on another aspect of the offender, which is how they contribute to the community. So how does that come out? What does that do for the restorative justice program?
Absolutely. Imagine you're 14 years old and you stole something of value from a local retailer. The first thing that comes to mind when you come to court is you're a thief. You stole something. Your charge is listed as theft, and you become attached to or defined by that charge or that crime. And people are not their crimes. People are people, and people make mistakes. And one of the key components that we apply to our conferences is a look at someone's assets, who they are, what they contribute back to the community, what their talents are, who they are as a person, and bring it right back to that human side. So if you're 14 and perhaps you did steal something from a local retailer and the group doesn't know that story, the story could come out that it could have been your mother's birthday and she is dying of cancer and you stole a necklace for her because you had no resources. When that story comes out, you might also hear that this young person is a straight A student or is an artist or a gifted artist and volunteers at a local shelter. You get to hear more about the person and how they contribute back. And if we looked at that person as the theft and the crime and the court process, it diminishes and devalues who that person is when they get to the next point in their life to make another similar choice.
So it's really encouraging, which is fascinating. If you look at any sort of research on identity, it's encouraging them to see this positive identity, to focus on the positive part of who they are and what they do to identify themselves, rather than this one single act that they have done that may have had a reason to it.
Yes,
that's just absolutely it's beautiful. It really is.
I would hate to be defined by anything I did from the time I was 5, to now. It would be traumatic. So watching our youth go through so much more, and that compounds. Like all we're doing is training them to be what the definition of them could be, and that's on us. That's our responsibility to change that lens, that picture.
Which is incredible. We're saying that it's our responsibility as a community. You're saying as a community, it's our responsibility to get them to see that part of them and to be that part of them.
Yes.
That's great. Kristen, I see that you have a great question.
Yeah. This question comes from Giovanni Ojeda. Not sure if I'm saying that right. But he asks, how does LCJP embrace multiculturalism? Is that possible in the restorative process?
Yes, and that's a great question. We are community-based and community-focused, and in our community, we are 30% Latino, and it is beautiful to see the diversity in a community from all aspects, and but that also means addressing crime and conflict from all approaches. It would be unfortunate for us to take one system and implant it again in another community and have expectations that it will work, just like our expectations that replicating LCJP at the DA's office would work. We are very fortunate to have a bilingual staff. 7 of the 14 of our staff members at any given time, so that's at least half, are bilingual. We're extremely fortunate to have 1 bilingual and bicultural staff member, and that person has engaged in such an outstanding way that means you get into the community. For us, a Latino community is family. It is long-standing traditions. It is values and an approach that is unique to that culture. And for us to be respectful of that community and that culture and embrace it means that we can still apply all of our principles and do it in a way that is authentic. We have had this year a full conference completely in Spanish, and that means victims, offenders, their support team, and all community members engaged in dialogue in their native language, in Spanish, and that's amazing. So love to see more of that for us, because our community just craves having opportunity to engage at all levels.
What does that do for the offender, for the victim, when you engage them in the culture that they're comfortable with, in the language that they're comfortable with? What does that do for them in the restorative justice process?
I'll give you an example of, I guess, another culture. We had a young offender who was sitting in a conference with a lot of adults and could not make eye contact. And because of his culture, because of his upbringing, that was disrespectful. He was shamed, and to make eye contact meant that he was dismissing his offense and not taking responsibility. That wasn't coming out in the conference. In the conference, they were having high expectations that he engage in a certain way, and realizing that was not his culture or his where he was coming from. To accept that, embrace that, and allow for that, change the dynamic completely. The same could be applied for any culture where you bring these principles and these practices together. It is not a set definition of how it should be executed. It is coming together. It's that relationship. And if you can have that relationship in an authentic way and do that with key partners or participants that are respectful and building that relationship through that conference, people will engage in a authentically. They'll engage because it has more meaning to them. It's not the same going to court. It's a different language and a different process, and you stand and there's expectations. But this isn't court. This is community.
So it arguably gives them more of a reason to participate, right? I mean, it gives them a lot more reason, and it makes them a lot more comfortable with going through this process. Is that right?
Yeah, if you've ever been to another country and they're yelling at you in a foreign language, I can tell you right now it's scary. And if you are sitting in a room and you don't speak the language and someone is trying to engage with you, it's frustrating. If you cannot communicate, or if you get a basic communication, it's still, you're on guard. You have a hard time engaging in that dialogue because you're limited. When you can fully engage and fully participate and know that your needs are being met, you're being heard, and being heard being key, then you're more apt to participate and contribute, and it's not as scary.
Yes, I have had that experience in another country. It was not it was not what I would call fun. So I can understand at least that side of it. Kristen, do we have any more comments to incorporate?
Sorry, it doesn't look like it at the moment.
Okay, well then I have a question for Candee, which we did not prepare beforehand, so sorry about this, Candee. If there was a question that you wanted to answer, that you want people to know about LCJP and restorative justice, what would it be?
I think for me, that will come from a personal response. I think if I could articulate in as easy as possible just how amazing an experience it is to participate in any level for a restorative practices or a restorative justice model. I would say, well, as I'm getting off track, I would love for people to know what it means from that soul level, from that personal experience, to sit in a conference and watch this unfold from a personal experience. I would want that for everyone, because it changes who we are. It changes how we respond to our own conflict, even at home. And I use this now at home with a 14-year-old son, and it has been a tremendous experience for me to be able to apply that. So I think if I were given one wish, it would be the opportunity for every individual to sit just once and witness what it means to engage in this way, in a restorative, respectful, relationship building, addressing harm and repairing harm in a way that is harmonious. That would be my wish.
So for people who, we'll do this one first. So for people who are near Longmont, where's the best, and they said, you know, I want to see this in action, I want to find out more about LCJP, where's the best place for them to visit?
I would have them visit our website at lcjp.org. It has a listing of everything from upcoming volunteer opportunities to white papers and documents and videos and testimonials for our program and what we do.
And for those who can't visit but want to, maybe they're like you and they have a 14-year-old son, which, oh my gosh, 14-year-old son. I remember my cousin at that age. That was an interesting age. And they want to try to use practices like the restorative practices to work on that relationship. Where can they go for information?
Well, there would be a few options. One, depending upon where they're at, I would check their school, check with the counselors and see if they already have an existing program in school. Kids are so like sponges, and they get these principles and concepts so readily and easily. I'd start with my kids. And again, our website has a lot of resources, and including links to articles and books that just explore basic restorative practices and principles. That would be my first start.
Okay, great. Kristen, one last check-in. Do we have any more comments, questions?
Just people are really impressed. They're just same thing that I am. They're just kind of like in awe, like, wow, this is really huge stuff.
You've made everybody speechless.
Yep.
Good job, Candee. That's all you. That's all you.
Well, that's all my team. I have to say, without our team, it would be impossible to do, for us to do this work at the level of engagement that we have. So it would be a big shout out to my team, just for really embracing and living and doing this work every day.
And a large part of that team is volunteer, right?
We have our staff. We have a really phenomenal staff that come from all different diverse backgrounds, and we have a large number of volunteers to which our staff helps mentor and coach and help their individual growth.
Which is just incredible. Okay, last question, and then I'll close this out, I promise. For people who want to try to start implementing this into their own justice system in their city or town, where is the best first place for them to go?
I guess that would depend on the town. The first place to go is their local resources and to build that group of stakeholders that have interest in moving moving a program forward. There are state resources and federal resources for funding to launch new programs. And we've done a lot of work with outside of our state and in our state to help train and coach and develop other programs. So we're happy to assist in any way, or again, anyone can email me directly, and I'm happy to send resources individually based on each program's request.
Wow. Wow. That's really nice of you. Okay, one more comment and then we're going to close this out.
Yeah,
Kristen.
I love this. From Griswold Grimm, we have from harm to harmonious.
Nice.
Oh, that's nice.
He's always great. He's always great with the words. Okay, well, I want to thank you so much, Candee, for joining us today to talk to us about what restorative justice is and what LCJP is and does and where Longmont is currently. I really do appreciate your time.
Thank you for having us.
And Kristen Drysdale of Lend One Hand, thank you so much for joining us. A link to the Lend One Hand website is in the event description, so I recommend our audience go and check them out. Kristen, I know you said you don't like to shout from the rooftops about Lend One Hand, but is there anything you want to say about Lend One Hand?
Yeah, we're just trying to create a community spirit where, you know, everyone has something that they can give, and so just one hand up and one hand down, bring everyone with you as you're learning and you're striving to make the world a better place. That's who we are.
Which is so in line with what LCJP does. So fantastic synergy there. Finally, thank you everyone in the audience for joining us. We will have Mike Butler, the chief, he goes by public safety officer because he does both the police and fire safety. It's a combined role. Very influential man, and he's going to talk about the history of LCJP. So that'll be a really interesting deep dive with him. That'll be on July 1st. We are skipping a month because of personal circumstances. Alex is moving back to Oregon. So join us July 1st to talk to Mike Butler. Remember, keep the conversation going with hashtag restorejustice. Keep that conversation going. We will be in the comments. We will be across social platforms keeping that conversation going because it is a very important conversation. And as Candee mentioned, one of the biggest obstacles is that educational awareness component. So we want to make sure we can do what we can to help them out there. All right. Thank you all so much for joining us. Bye.